Hey, Virginia. Hey, Linda. Whatever.
I got on my tablet. You're recording.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, y'all were in church Sunday when you heard her say that we should review the last word 9. So we'll try and spend about 10 minutes, and it won't hurt for us to talk about that a little bit more, I don't think.
Yeah, right.
But
Yeah, you're right. What's happened this week?
Justine, are you on the phone? Can you see if I put something on the screen?
No, right now I can only see you and Patty.
Okay, that's good. That's what I needed to know.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so this is talking this week about the 10th commandment, the 10th word. Don't fix on what you don't have, or to put it as King James puts it. Well, we'll get to how King James puts it in a minute. But let's open with prayer.
Okay.
And
the whole thing out.
okay, I need to do something here. Okay, I've got an issue with my screen. We're gonna have to cut this out.
Yeah. Right.
Here we go. Try this again. Okay, can everybody see everything, or is something blocking it?
No, that's it.
Well, the
I can
pictures
see
are
it.
blocking it on my screen.
I pinched out.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to pinch out, how to get this out. Oh, there we go. There.
Okay.
Now I'm good. Are you
I can
okay?
read it. I can read it.
Okay, Linda, can you read it?
No, I still have the pictures on the side of my screen. Maybe it's me.
Okay, there's if you look at the top left on the pictures, there's a little straight line. If you click that, that should minimize it.
Okay, wait a minute. Go ahead. I'll keep up.
Okay, it's our opening prayer then. Gracious
Gracious
God,
God,
you
you
have
have given us everything,
our
our lives,
our
our
provisions,
visions,
our
our
families,
families,
and
and
our
our
faith.
faith.
We are
We are
grateful
grateful
for
for
every
every
gift,
gift,
and
and
especially
especially
for
for the gift of time
together
together
to ponder your word.
your word.
Open us
Open us
to
to
this
see in
word,
this word,
God,
oh God,
Oh God,
your
your
invitation
invitation
to
to embrace our lives with
joy
joy,
and
joy and
gratitude.
gratitude.
help us
Help
Help us
us,
fill us with
fill
your
us with
grace.
your grace.
In Jesus'
In
name
Jesus'
we
name
pray.
we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, now I got
Okay.
to get everybody back on there.
Okay, so like I said, we're going to try and spend about 10 minutes to review word 9, which means shouldn't bear false witness, shouldn't speak, you shouldn't lie, you should speak truthfully. And so you saw that we talked a little bit about the differences in the Hebrew when you're looking at when the 10 Commandments are written in Exodus and when they're written in Deuteronomy. They were actually written a lot later in Deuteronomy, and so they were adapted a little bit to see how to adapt a little more to what was happening in Israel at the time.
Yes.
And so in Exodus, the word that they used in Exodus talked a little bit more. What it was really focusing on was court testimony. Basically, tell the truth just tell the truth when you're in court. Not part of the truth, not a little bit of the truth. And as we talked a little, the whole truth.
But the whole truth, so help you God.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's the oath you take. Here, I guess that you probably took a similar oath when you testified back in Israel when these words were written.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it sort of encompassed three things. You weren't supposed to lie, and that's the obvious part. You're not supposed to use testimony to damage reputations. So, and what they're talking about there, I think, is dragging up things that had happened in the past, which, while true, really had nothing to do with whatever the issue in court is. But it was to try and influence the judge, influence the jury. I don't know if they had juries back then, but influence a judge to rule against them just because they were bad people, as opposed to the facts that were in front of the case. And interestingly enough, like I said, I didn't know this before. You're not supposed to testify about hearsay.
Yes.
They didn't want you to testify about what you heard, only about what you could see, what you see, or what you knew.
Mm-hmm.
Then in Deuteronomy, the word they used there expanded the definition of false witness, bearing false witness. To include issues of shading the truth to make you look better. And if you watch TV at all, and this really is more the political part of it, but if you watch TV at all, in every political advertisement you see, they're shading the truth to make themselves look better.
Yes, they are.
It doesn't matter if it's somebody you're going to vote for or somebody you're going to vote against. They are shading the truth.
Yeah, they all lie.
Well, I'm not going to say they're lying, because there's some element of truth in everything they say. Well,
Yeah,
except
that
for
is
one
true.
person maybe, but
Yeah.
but I mean, the ads I've seen, there's some element of truth to them, but then they shade it to make themselves look better.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about and part of the reason the reason for this part of the rule is to really protect the people in society that needed protection. The poor, the widows, the disadvantaged, the foreigners, the immigrants. They wanted to make sure that these people were treated fairly in court, that they weren't falsely accused, that they weren't trampled on by the court system or by other ways just because they couldn't stand up for themselves. Because one of the things that was important to God in bringing out this particular word was that society needed a court system that everybody could trust. And so we talked a little bit about our court system, which has a lot of the same rules that we talked about in the ninth word, in the ninth commandment. And I guess the question we discussed a little bit was whether we have a court system now that everybody can trust, that everybody has faith that things are going to be fairly done.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things we talked about a little bit is that I think the same thing has happened to our court system that probably happened in the Israel's court system, that it gets so complicated. The rules have gotten so complicated that you need a lawyer or a Sadducee to represent you, or else you're going to get run over by the person that has that lawyer or Sadducee.
Mhm.
And so you have the impression in looking at the court system, and to some extent it's true, that money buys justice. And you also, we've been focused a lot more on this year than we have in the past, although we should have been focusing on it all along. The sort of call it systemic racism. It's not exactly what I'm trying to say, but the people that are responsible for making decisions in the court system bring their own prejudices to the court system.
Yes, yes.
And
Yes.
sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. But and I like to think most of the times not, but it doesn't make any difference whether they're doing it on purpose or not. It still has the same effect. And that's one of the systems. You see people focusing on the police a lot this year because of that sort of inherent racism, inherent prejudice, whatever you want to call it. But it happens in the court system the same way. It just isn't, they aren't killing people, they're just sending people to jail or taking people's property. And so, I mean, so the government throws a little Band-Aid on it by creating legal aid and public defenders. And that's certainly helpful. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but there just isn't enough of them, and that there isn't a prejudice that still exists when you have a public defender against a lawyer that's charging $2,000 an hour.
You know, that reminds me, remember when we first moved down here and you told me about Judge Land? Judge Land had given a black man a 10-year sentence for stealing a loaf of bread to feed his family.
Oh, really?
10 years.
And you know that you see really outrageous examples every once in a while, but what's also worrisome is just the small examples that aren't so outrageous that they get to the news.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And the example, I don't know how much y'all know about the case of Leo Frank out of Atlanta back in, I think it was the early 1900s, where he was Jewish and owned some kind of factory. I forget what kind now. And one of his workers got killed. And because he was Jewish, the system just railroaded him through the system, convicted him, and executed him when it's really very likely he didn't do anything. But it was that prejudice against Jews that did it. And you know, you see it, that was an example that they used, but you all know for yourselves, not personally maybe, but how the system treats minorities, immigrants, particularly immigrants. Anyway, so that's a lot of what that Speak Truthfully was about when it was in Exodus. Talked a little bit about when it was okay to lie. Um, and really, and also when we should keep the truth to ourselves. And we all know people that think that just because it's true, they have to say it.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you keep in mind that all of these 10 commandments are about helping people in society get along with each other.
That's right. They still ignore it.
And there aren't specific examples you can use. Well, they probably are, but we're only supposed to be doing a short review right now. But it's all about your intent. It's all about helping you love each other.
Yeah, that's right.
And when you're telling this lie, are you telling it out of love? When you tell the truth about something, are you telling the truth in love? Not in love for yourself, not in love, not to gain you something, but to help that other person or help those other people. And then we talk a little bit about, everybody knows somebody whose tone of voice will tell you that you're stupid every time they talk to you.
Oh, yes. Chip.
Definitely.
And so the other thing about that is, you be careful how you deliver the truth, how you talk to people.
Right.
And going back to the politics, I mean, I mentioned this before, that if every political ad I've seen is manipulating the truth in some way. Now, I like the way it's manipulated sometimes, but that doesn't make it right.
That's right.
That's
That's right.
true. Mm.
And that's the other thing that this particular word's talking about, is you don't use your words to try and manipulate others to get you. Don't use manipulation to try and gain some advantage for you.
This is right. This is right.
Mm.
Okay, I've used more than 5 or 10 minutes here, but the one thing that American culture has gotten so ingrained, it's so ingrained in us as Americans, that everything you do is okay as long as it helps get you ahead.
This is right. This is right.
Yeah, that's society.
And that's the kind of attitude we need to be not participate in, and just get that out of our heads, that's not the way we as Christians need to act.
This is right.
And that's not the way the Jews back in whenever these commandments were written were supposed to act. That was kind of the point. That's why they used a more expansive word for false witness in Deuteronomy than they did in Exodus, because they saw how their society was developing after the 10 commandments were given. And so the writer in Deuteronomy just used some words and made it a little more expansive. Okay, I think that's it. It is.
Okay.
Okay. So now we're talking about the last word. Don't fix on what you don't have. And if that's not a condemnation of American society, nothing is.
That's right.
Sure is.
Yeah.
And they talk about the you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, is, whatever. And I don't think, we'll talk a little bit more about it, but that's kind of the basic thing. And what was interesting to me, which is off the point totally, But look at verse 20. Look at what verse 20 says. And it's just a concept that
Yes.
when I was young, my uncle used to talk to me, get on me about being lazy or about not doing what I should at church, stuff like that. And he'd ask me, you know, why are you a Christian? I said, well, I don't want to go to hell. So, and he tried to explain to me that really wasn't what God was looking for.
Mhm.
Right.
But this particular verse, at least the way it was written in the New International Version, is God's trying to put fear in you so you don't sin.
Yes.
Mhm.
So anyway, that, like I said, that was beside the point. It was that's a concept I'd never seen in the Bible anywhere else.
But thinking of what you said earlier, imagine what would have to happen to shake and literally put a godly fear in Americans.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It would have to be something so, I don't know, powerful, out of the left field, unusual, because Americans don't even fear acting ugly. We don't fear, the rotation of lies 24/7 on the news and on the political commercials. So for us to have a healthy dose of godly fear,
Yeah, this is right.
would be something that probably would scare most people just enough to make them say, well, I don't want to go to hell.
Mhm.
And maybe,
Mhm.
attached to Jesus for a little fire insurance. And hopefully along the way, someone with a lot of wisdom like Paul's uncle would be able to spend time with them and make them aware that the lifestyle within the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit and God, is so much more than just having fire insurance.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is right.
Mhm.
This is right.
Mhm.
But when you, anyway, that's an aside, and we don't have that much time left to.
Mhm.
That might be an interesting Bible study, though, to have.
Yes.
I agree.
Okay, so they're talking about Covet, and again, and probably jumping the gun on my on my slides here, and I'm pretty sure I am. So maybe I won't. So we got a couple of examples of covet of people in the Bible that coveted. And these are the scriptures that were referenced in the materials, and and obviously what I did was summarize Kings. That is not 16 verses of Kings. That's just my summary of what that story was about.
Yes. Yes.
I forgot to put in there that Ahab acted like a little baby and pouted until he got his way. And then the Luke story is just Jesus kind of re-emphasizing this, that you got to watch out about for greed. Be on your lookout for all kinds of greed, and I think he's talking about in yourself.
Yeah, this is true.
Mhm.
And just reminding you that life does not consist of abundance possessions.
So, Paul, one of the things that I would add, when you look at the word covet,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a covenant with God,
Mm-hmm.
there's a root word there, and it all threads together. It's what's remaining in your house, and your house is you.
Mm-hmm.
the covenant that allows you to be in agreement with God on how to be in community and and walk through this realm? Or does it shift and become something twisted and ugly? And that was one of the reasons in my reading, that this is so important, that you don't covet, that you don't bring into your inner being something that really isn't yours, because there's a power in who we are as divinely created beings to manifest, and that's part of why we should not covet. It breaks the covenant with God in so many different ways, because it changes how you see your neighbor and sometimes your family and your leaders. All of those things can shift just because you're not in covenant. You're in covet. You're coveting.
And you see just in the Ahab story that coveting also impacted a couple of other commandments that got broken along the way.
Right.
Okay, so we have a little bit of entertainment here. So you apologize for some of the language, but
Oh, I love him.
oh, what happened?
Go back, Paul.
I would have been out here a little bit sooner, but they gave me
Oh, yeah.
and I couldn't find any place to put my stuff. And I don't know how you are, but I need a place to put my stuff. So that's what I've been doing back there, just trying to find a place for my stuff. You know how important that is. That's the whole meaning of life, isn't it? Trying to find a place for your stuff. That's all your house is. Your house is.
Ah, shoot. Wait, I apologize. This is trying to do something, trying to get a little more. Can you all hear him?
Yes,
Okay.
a little bit.
And I couldn't find any place to put my stuff. And I don't know how you are, but I need a place to put my stuff. So that's what I've been doing back there, just trying to find a place for my stuff. You know how important that is. That's the whole meaning of life, isn't it? Trying to find a place for your stuff. That's all your house is. Your house is just a place for your stuff. If you didn't have so much goddamn stuff, you wouldn't need a house. You could just walk around all the time. That's all your house is a pile of stuff with a cover on. You see that when you take off in an airplane and you look down and you see everybody's got a little pile of stuff. Everybody's got their own pile of stuff. And when you leave your stuff, you gotta lock it up. Wouldn't want somebody to come by and take some of your stuff. They always take the good stuff. They don't bother with that crap you're saving. Ain't nobody interested in your fourth grade arithmetic papers. They're looking for the good stuff. That's all your house is. It's a place to keep your stuff while you go out and get more stuff.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Sometimes you gotta move. You gotta get a bigger house. Why? Too much stuff. You gotta move all your stuff. And maybe put some of your stuff in storage. Now imagine that. There's a whole industry based on keeping an eye on your stuff. Enough about your stuff. Let's talk about other people's stuff. Did you ever notice when you go to somebody else's house, you never quite feel 100% at home? You know why? No room for your stuff. Somebody else's stuff is all over the place. Awful stuff it is. Where did they get this stuff? And if you have to stay overnight at someone's house, unexpectedly, and they give you a little room to sleep in that they don't use that often, someone died in it 11 years ago, and they haven't moved any of his stuff. Or wherever they give you to sleep, usually right near the bed, there's a dresser, and there's never any room on the dresser for your stuff. Someone else's shit is on the dresser. Have you noticed that their stuff is shit and your shit is stuff? Get that off of there. Now, sometimes you go on vacation, you gotta bring some of your stuff with you. You can't bring all your stuff, just the stuff you really like. The stuff that fits you well that month. Let's say you're gonna go to Honolulu. You're gonna go all the way to Honolulu. You gotta take 2 big bags of stuff, plus your carry-on stuff, plus the stuff in your pockets. You get all the way to Honolulu and you get in your hotel room and you start to put away your stuff. That's the first thing you do in a hotel room is put away your stuff. I'll put some stuff in here, put some stuff down there. Here's another place for some stuff here. I'll put some stuff over there. You put your stuff over there. I'll put my stuff over here. Here's another place for some stuff. Hey, we got more places than we've got stuff. We're going to have to buy more stuff. And you put all your stuff away, and you know that you're thousands of miles from home, and you don't quite feel at ease, but you know that you must be okay because you do have some of your stuff with you. And you relax in Honolulu on that basis. That's when your friend from Maui calls and says, hey, why don't you come over to Maui for the weekend? Spend a couple of nights over here. Oh, shit, no. Now what stuff do you bring? Right, you've got to bring an even smaller version of your stuff. Just enough stuff for a weekend on Maui. And you get over, and you're really spread out now. You've got shit all over the world. You've got stuff at home, stuff in storage, stuff in Honolulu, stuff in Maui, stuff in your pockets. Supply lines are getting longer and harder to maintain. But you get over to your friend's house in Maui, and they give you a little place to sleep. There's a little window ledge with some kind of a small shelf. And there's not much room on it, but it's okay because you don't have much stuff now. And you put what stuff you do have up there. You put your important French toenail clippers, your odor leaders with a 45-day guarantee, your cinnamon-flavored dental floss, and your Afrin 12-hour decongestant nasal spray. And you know you're a long way from home. You know that you must be okay because you do have your Afrin 12-hour decongestant nasal spray. And you relax in Maui on that basis. That's when your friend says, hey, I think tonight we'll go over the other side of the island, stay at my friend's house overnight. Oh, shit, no. No! What do you bring? Now you just bring the things you know you're going to need. Money, keys, comb, wallet, lighter, hanky, pen, cigarettes, contraceptives, Vaseline, whips, chains, whistles, dildos, and a book.
Okay, so that wasn't exactly on point, but that is so American that and
Sure is.
the main kind of line that I picked out of there, well, that they reference in the materials too, is our houses are just a pile of stuff with a roof over it.
That's it. Yeah.
And our economy, if you think about it, is based on us wanting to get more stuff.
Yeah.
That's true.
And when you get into a pandemic and we stop buying stuff, then they start begging. Say, please come to my restaurant so I don't have to close. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, and the fact that there's nothing evil about having stuff. There's nothing evil about, well, there might be something evil about the way things are advertised.
Yes.
Yes, there is.
But what gets me are these car dealerships who try to convince you that you really need to buy a car in the middle of a pandemic. You don't have a job. You can't pay your bills as it is. So, you know, that's just.
Well, you
crazy.
know, when I was in real estate, rule number one is that if people become emotionally attached, you can make the sale. The problem is what George Carlin was talking about, the emotional attachment we have to junk and to having all of these little things. So, you know, if you know, I'm thankful that many years ago I learned not to make an emotional purchase. It's caused me to walk away from a lot of things I really wanted, but you know, it is a good practice because we don't realize, you know, the thing is, if you've ever been in sales, you know what it is to make a pitch. And everything is making a pitch. The thing is, you don't have to catch the ball. If you catch the ball, you can even decide, the ball isn't worth it. And in this society, our consciousness has been constructed and shaped through the lens of what we see and hear on TV. So now faith is, you got to hear the word if you need faith. But we're hearing everything but the word. We're hearing the word of the car dealership, the word of the dressmakers, the word of, the politics. We're hearing the word of everything, but we need to hear the word of God. If you lack faith, then that's what you have to hear. You have to hear it. And because we've heard so much of everything else, it brings us into that space where, yeah, we can begin to covet. People even covet. Oh, she has the gift of this. People covet other people and how they walk with God. Not in good ways either, but in horrible ways. So that was an excellent clip. And 90% of what we do involves our emotions. And sometimes you need to step back and take your emotions out of it and make a sound decision.
Yeah. So stepping back, and I mentioned a little bit earlier that again, Exodus and Deuteronomy use different words for the word covet. And taking this mainly from the materials, but the word in Exodus is basically what's happening to you right now. Do you want something so bad that you're going to go get it no matter what happens?
Right.
Yeah.
While in Deuteronomy, the writer saw that there was other things going on, and he's talking about something that happens to you more long term.
It's internal.
Right.
It's internal, right. And it's not so that you're not. It's living your life in a way that you're not satisfied with where you are.
Right. But that's part of the construct of the teaching that happens through the commercials. You always are going higher. There's no place for satisfaction. Because once you get there, then you're looking at what's next, what's the next level. And we have literally been taught that in this country.
And think of how your parents were manipulated when you were a child and you were watching cartoons on Saturday morning. How many commercials do you think they tried to convince you that you needed to be happy? And then if your parent didn't buy them for you, they didn't love you. We've been brainwashed since we were kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, now, I was not put in front of TV to watch cartoons.
Yeah, probably didn't have a TV. Yeah, yada, yada, yada.
Oh.
That's what's wrong with him. But I did not allow my daughters, I controlled what they saw on TV for many, many years. I didn't have cable. I didn't have, if it wasn't educational, something I considered productive and constructional to their development, they did not see it. They didn't even get on Facebook until well into their teens, but it was after they earned it. So, parenting, I think if I had said, hey, they have this or that, my grandmother would always say to me, well, I'm not raising them, I'm raising you.
That's right. We can spoil our grandkids.
I was a grandchild. They did not, they spoiled me a little bit, but they didn't spoil me. My cousins would come and they would get better treatment than me.
But see, that's because they were essentially your parent at that point.
Right.
They were parenting you. They weren't grandparenting you.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, so we see some of the examples of in biblical examples of coveting and the consequences of it. were other, I've talked about David and Bathsheba, Ahab and Adam and Eve. Can
Mhm.
anybody think of other examples in the Bible where coveting went
Esau
wrong?
and Jacob. Esau and
Oh, yeah,
Jacob.
Jacob, Esau, Canaan,
Yeah.
Abel.
Joseph.
Mm-hmm. And his brothers, they were sure enough covetous. Mhm.
Okay. All right. So one thing they talk about is, and we're talking a little bit more about the Deuteronomy version rather than the Exodus version. And they make a point that we focus a lot on the wealthy, and for good reason, when we're talking about coveting. And I know when we're watching the 10th version of Star Wars or the 100th version of Marvel movies, Patty will many times come up, well, why does he need more money? He's already got $20 billion. What's this about? But I think we need to, that was a bad example apparently, but.
Well, no, greed is never satisfied. Greed is just greed. There's no satisfaction in greed.
Mhm.
It just, yeah, it stays hungry, it stays thirsty. It is never satisfied.
So one thing that they talk about in the materials is the difference between the people that are already powerful seeking more power and the downtrodden seeking more power, because that may mean need a little bit of a transition, because coveting isn't just about things. It's about status. It's about feelings. I mean, all of us, I think, at some point or another, have wanted to be better, in a better position, whether it's in a job or whether it's in politics, whether it's in a church. We've wanted to be in a better position than we are now.
Well, I don't know about others, but in the Black community, we were always taught that the parents always wanted us to do better than they did and go further than they went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what we're going to end up talking about, and maybe start talking about it now, it isn't the desire for something that this word is talking about. It's letting that desire be your primary purpose in life. And
We call it being driven.
Yeah.
Yes.
Letting that desire be more important
Right.
than you having, than the responsibility you have to your community, than your relationship with God.
Right.
So I don't know if the powerful can seek more power and still have love in their hearts. I don't know if that's true or not, but certainly there's nothing wrong with the poor, the people that are being discriminated against, trying to do something to fix that. But I think even in that situation, there is a danger of wanting that so badly that you don't maintain your relationship with God, that you don't maintain your love and honor toward other people.
Right.
And that really, I think, is the focus.
Well, and we have a lot of sayings for that. When I was in the business community and someone was undercut, it's just business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have become such a part of American life. And I think we mentioned this earlier, that we don't even, a lot of people in the Christian community, never occurs to them there's something wrong with that as long as you're doing it as part of a business.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with running a pawn shop that basically rips people off, as long as it's business.
And what's worse, the big banks that wouldn't give you a decent loan, they're the ones funding the pawn shops and the
Mhm.
title pawns.
Oh yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
One thing, the only decent piece of consumer legislation is Georgia is banning title pawns.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And unfortunately, we live right next door to Phoenix City, where it's perfectly legal.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
You know, when you have a 300% interest rate, there should be a problem. And if your
Mhm.
government
Definitely.
doesn't have a problem with it, you need to really shake your government up where you live.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And actually, on those payday loans,
They banned those too, didn't they?
they did, and
Okay.
and actually, it's the payday loans that were banned, not the title pawns. I'm sorry. But the payday loans, those interest rates, if you actually look at it, can go up to 1,200%.
Whoa.
Mhm.
But those are the ones that sneak over the river from Phoenix City. I mean, all
Right.
somebody that lives in Columbus has to do is go over to Phoenix City if they want to get them.
Wow.
Mhm.
But
So does that law, I mean, well, I guess they have your bank information. And if you're in another state, you know,
well,
that's interesting that you can go to another state and do it.
I tried to argue when they tried to sue people in Georgia. I tried to argue it was against our public policy, but the courts never bought it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
It's no different than going over people in Phoenix City coming over here to get the lottery tickets.
Right.
Mhm.
Right, that's true.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. I don't think an argument would stand up. We say they can't have the money because they're in Alabama. You know.
Mhm.
But it's a vicious cycle
Mhm.
that is happening, and it's all consuming. And as we can see,
It is.
you know,
Mhm.
just tune in anyway. Everything is all consuming. The coveting that's going on, rather than the health of the community. We can look and
Mhm.
see what Kentucky did today.
Mhm.
They're looking out for the health of just a few people, you know, even if it means a little lie has to be in there. So, and then you prepare, because all of those people with the pristine businesses and places, those people that are protesting are paying for the police to protect those places and not protect them.
Mhm. Mhm.
It really does. It's mind-boggling. And when you get into coveting and where it starts and where it begins in your heart, and as it begins to manifest in your life, you can just have a thread of something going on that it will be hard to undo.
Mhm.
And we saw that with with Joseph's brothers, right down to when the daddy died, where you're going to kill us, don't kill us, forgive us. Because they were still worried about themselves, coveting their own safety and their own way of being.
Mhm. Mhm.
But the minute he said, well, I'm going to take care of you and your children and everyone, then they were okay. You hear no more from Joseph's brothers.
Mhm. And then you have suburbia, where covetousness is taken to a whole new level. Because we used to call it keeping up with the Joneses, where if your neighbor got something, then you have to have something better.
Patty, I kid you not, there was a neighbor we had, and if we mowed the lawn, he came right out and mowed the lawn. And one of the other neighbors, both of them, their name was Mike. And Mike was talking, he said, is it me, or does Mike on the other side of you? Every time I mow my lawn, he mows his lawn. I said, well, he could have just, and I tested it, and we would let Mike mow his lawn, go right out and mow our lawn, and the next morning, he would be out there edging and mowing. You're blessed. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. But time and time again, I know one weekend I had gone out and Kenny and I had edged and shrubs and stuff, and he came right back out and his house was done. And he ended up cutting our cable line.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, I can't watch football. So it was something that was so blatant. And it made no sense. And finally, I just said, well, I'm going to mow my lawn whenever. We all tested it enough to know that no matter what, if you mowed your lawn or, did something to your shrubs, he was coming out to do it too.
And I remember when I was little, I would ask my mama, I said, why does everybody want a deuce and a quarter? Why does everybody want a Cadillac? Even people who couldn't afford a Cadillac wanted a Cadillac. And I asked, I said, Mama, does Mr. So-and-so actually live in his car? Because you never see him go in. He was sleeping in that Cadillac. And I said, well, that's nuts. If he can't afford it, don't get it.
It's kind of like I heard a preacher say once that he said, I'm not going to call anyone out, but a bunch of members had gone and bought Mercedes and different things. He said, yeah, I've been at the gas station and I hear you put $3 in the tank. Oh, Lord. Like, what's the point? Get you a nice Toyota, and be able to fill it up. He said, you know who you are. And there have been many members he had, been at the gas station at the same time. They're putting $5 in, $3 in.
Yep.
I think the root is being okay with seeing someone else be happy. Even if it's just their car that made them happy or the shoe.
I think so too.
There's a problem. It's like God's like, don't covet. Be happy for your neighbor. Be happy that your neighbor got a Cadillac. Be happy. Don't just look at the fact that you don't have a Cadillac. So some of that is that we're just not happy. There's no satisfaction, and if you're not satisfied, then you cannot get to being grateful. Paul's favorite song, grateful, 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 grateful.
You can't sing it 30 times. It's the same word 30 times.
Yeah.
Well, if you've gotten to a point where you've come from so far, there are literally, and I've experienced it myself, where you can say that same word over, and every breath that you take and you say it again, there's a whole different experience. You see something totally different that you're grateful for, that God delivered you from, that God lifted you out of, that God turned around for you, that God brought into your space. So that's why that song is so popular with some people, because they could say, grateful 1,000 times, because 1,000 times in their lives, if it were not for God.
Oh yeah, we were not God.
So with people not having any satisfaction and feeling satisfied, I dare to say living in a posture of coveting and always wanting more and things makes you a very soulless person. The soul responds to gratitude and gratefulness. The soul responds to being happy for someone else, genuinely sparking, love for your neighbor and for your fellow, brother, your community, and then understanding that yes, if I'm eating and someone in my neighborhood isn't, shame on me. That's not how we think. We're like, well, they should go to work. If you don't work, you don't eat. People just say all type of things that believers, because I'm talking about believers. You have entire churches that have a group of BMW drivers and they all park together, a group of Mercedes drivers and they all park together. This is going on among the believers. And my question was, and has been for years, how many of the people in your church are doing without. Lost their home, lost their car. Why are those people not being better served by the church that sits in their community?
Well, I think that's exactly what Charlotte was just talking about, is exactly the point of this word. In particular, it was the point of the word as it was translated in Deuteronomy. When they're talking about, what they're talking about is having this sort of emptiness, this sort of this hole that you
That
have,
hole, Charlotte. Yeah, I thought about you, Charlotte, when I read it.
the hole that you're always trying to fill, and you're always trying to fill it with stuff. Stuff.
But you know, Paul, it goes even further. In America, there are people mutilating their bodies because they can never see beauty in the mirror. They're never satisfied with themselves. We've turned on ourselves. We will see someone else's lips. I want those lips. Get a picture. Give me those lips. Someone else's eyes. To the point that we're even mutilating our own bodies. People injecting cement and everything else, you know, into their, you know, buttocks and, you know, all type of things, and, you know, serious, you know, health problems. So this coveting is one of those things that, you know, if cured, could solve a lot of problems, even how we see ourselves.
I don't know, our economy might collapse.
Well, you know what? And that might be a good thing, because if it's built on anything less than Jesus' blood and righteousness, it should fall.
Okay. So, you see, this is this quote that they had from this 18th century rabbi. And this is kind of the point we're trying to make. And before I go back, one thing I wanted to say is, I think this particular word, this particular commandment, is the hardest for Christians to, particularly American Christians, to
I think so.
not violate.
It is. It's awfully hard.
And I like this quote from this 18th century rabbi. When love and compassion fill your hearts, predatory desires have no place to root.
And you know, it's really hard to see genuine love and compassion these days. You know, I was beside myself Friday when the woman's body wasn't even cold, and they said, we're going to fill her sentence, her Supreme Court seat.
Yeah.
Mom, you know, my daughter was like, calm down, because I literally cried when I heard the news, because I knew she didn't want to die and this man fill her seat. And it was just the nerve. And I said, surely, when her granddaughter said no, she said, wait till after the election. Surely we will honor the last words of a dying person. Then I had to be reminded, you live in America.
What she had said.
Right.
Make it seem like what somebody else had influenced her to say that, or she didn't say it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's very cruel. It's very cruel. You know, and I and I get that, you know, everyone has an agenda. Within their coveting ways, they have an agenda. No one is satisfied with just themselves being right. You have to move into judgment, and your neighbor has to be the type of righteousness you think is righteousness before God. I get that there's an agenda, but there's a cruelty and a biting way of being that has began to happen in this country that I pray doesn't just destroy all of who we are. And I've really looked at people and I've said, are you willing to tear this country down just because you want to repeal Roe versus Wade?
Yep, they are.
And and the thing is, statistically, a lot of Christians are having abortions. So I'm like, help me, God, with this. Statistically, Christians are having just as many abortions.
Mm-hmm.
So this, if you do have love and compassion, it can remove other things that shouldn't be there and fill up those spaces that nothing else can get in. So sometimes Christians are very splintered people.
Mm-hmm.
And is there the cruelty? I have relatives, they'll say, well, I do not believe in a female pastor. And you know what? Because it's a relative, I'm like, shut up, go sit down. It's like, why did you walk up to me and insult me?
That's right.
So, some people don't believe in Jesus. So what? Keep it moving.
That's right. That is so true. That is so
And
true.
if you had love and,
They should try and make sure that those kids that have been brought in this world, that they'll take responsibility and making sure that their needs are wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The ones that they have, that they're taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I just can't see it. But I don't know what their purpose is.
There's, in my view, we are just dancing in front of God, daring God to get angry with us.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
We don't want abortions, but we're going to rip these women's uterus right out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The wrath of God, we don't know what that is really. I think we got a taste of it during the Civil War, but we really don't understand what the wrath of God is. And I think we are, as a country, we're saying, oh, come on, God's not going to do anything.
I think God is winding up to do something.
Yes, I do too.
He is winding up.
I do too.
Well, half the country's on fire.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it's underwater.
That's true.
So they had a tremor in California. It wasn't that bad, but then you hear about odd places having an earthquake.
Mm-hmm. Philadelphia had one.
You cannot do the things we're doing and not bring the wrath of God down upon you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. This is right.
Think about it. You cannot do what Cain did, kill his brother, and God's like, oh, excuse me, I hear your brother talking. What did you do?
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost as if I don't get it. I can see some things and just think, people have lost their minds.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do herd immunity. Really? Do you know how many people are going to die? It's as if your life isn't even worth it if it means somebody else gets something that they want.
This is right.
Mm-hmm.
This is right.
Yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And we are really in a scary place in this country, and we all could revisit the 10 Commandments. It would behoove us to revisit the 10 Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and next Wednesday, we're going to revisit all 10 of them.
Yay!
You mean in the form of a quiz?
No quizzes. Okay. I appreciate everybody participating and picking up to keep me from having to talk, because talking wasn't going to be that inspirational.
Oh, yes, it was.
So let's
Always is, Paul.
Yes, it was.
let's do this. Let's do the closing prayer. This is the closing prayer from the materials. Gracious God, your love for us is immense. We thank you for reaching out to us in 10 words and giving us a blueprint for living. More even than that.
We thank you.
Thank you. that in the
fullness of time,
you sent Jesus to us
to show
to
us
show us
what it
what it
is
is
like
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 to
to
live
live
these
these
words.
words fully.
Give us
Give
Give us
us
courage,
Oh
oh
God,
God,
to
to
live
to
live
live as
as
your
your
holy people,
people,
modeling
modeling
our
our
lives
lives
on
on
Christ,
Christ,
transformed
transformed
by
by
your
our
by
deep
your
love.
deep love.
In
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 Jesus'
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 holy
Jesus'
name,
name we
holy
holy
pray.
name.
we
name
pray.
we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
So, beloved, final word, hard, but we can do it. Learn to be content with what you have. God has
Okay.
given us exactly what we need. We need to
Yes, he
learn to be
has.
content. And no more, I don't have room in my house for anything. I'm tired of stuff. I got,
Oh,
I really don't have room.
I know. Charlotte tried to move half her stuff to the church.
I did. I wouldn't have room for that desk or anything anymore.
It's just, learn to be content where you are, because you're right where God wants you to be.
yeah.
So go from there.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.